Hi everyone. As you probably now know, on the 20th of March 2020, the Irish government enacted an emergency piece of legislation to facilitate restrictions they said would slow the spread of the virus known as COVID-19. The short title to this legislation is the Health Preservation and Protection and Other Emergency Measures in the Public Interest Act 2020. Part 3, Section 10 of this Act gives the Minister for Health the power to make regulations to restrict your travel, to require you to remain in your home, and to prohibit you organising or partaking in events which can include you leaving your place of residence to go to work. Section 10 of the Act, however, also requires the Minister for Health to implement regulations to give effect to the powers set out in Section 10 of the Act. I confirm that the Minister for Health signed these regulations into law on the 8th of April 2020. The purpose of this video, therefore, is to outline the restrictions set out in these regulations, and also at the end of this video I will deal with some of the questions I have been asked most frequently over the past several days around the legality of these regulations. So what do the regulations say? The title of the regulation is Statutory Instrument Number 121 of 2020. Health Act 1947, Section 31A, Temporary Restrictions COVID-19 Regulations 2020. This regulation is split over the following sections. Section 1 deals with issues such as the commencement date of the regulations, which is said to be the 8th of April 2020, meaning that restrictions on your movements were not legally enforceable before that date. Section 2 deals with the expiration date of the regulations, which is said to be the 12th of April 2020. However, it should be noted that the Minister for Health can, at any time, issue new regulations which effectively extend this date, and the Taoiseach reported on the 10th of April 2020 that this regulation is likely to be extended until at least the 5th of May 2020. That said, I can confirm that at the time of recording this video, the regulation has not been extended to the 5th of May. Section 3 is the definition section. This section contains definitions for terms such as who is an applicable person. This term is relevant because these regulations only apply to you if you are an applicable person. So, what is an applicable person? It is anyone who lives in a relevant geographical location, with a relevant geographical location meaning a location to which an affected area order applies. I can confirm that on the same date this regulation was implemented, the government also implemented Statutory Instrument Number 120 of 2020, Affected Areas Order 2020. This order lists the entire state of Ireland as an affected area. What this means is, as matters currently stand, an applicable person is anyone in the state of Ireland. So the restrictions set out in these regulations apply to everyone in the state. Section 4 of the regulations deals with restriction of movement of applicable persons and provides that people in the state cannot leave their homes without reasonable excuse. So Section 4 of the regulations sets out the reasons the government consider it permissible for you to leave your home. This section includes the likes of provision of an essential service such as agriculture, manufacturing, electricity, construction, retail, transport. The full list of essential services is set out at Schedule 2 of the regulations. Other reasons the government consider it acceptable for you to leave your home include to go to an essential retail outlet, such as outlets selling food or beverages, chemists, service stations, builders merchants. The full list of essential retail outlets are set out at Schedule 1 of the regulations. Other reasons classified as reasonable excuses to leave your home include going to the bank, attending a medical appointment, seeking emergency dental assistance, donating blood, seeking veterinary assistance, exercising either alone or with any other person living in your residence within a 2-kilometre radius of that residence. The full list of reasonable excuses can be found at Section 4 of the regulations. Section 5 of the regulations deals with restrictions on events and provides that it is not permitted to hold or participate in an event unless it is a relevant event. A relevant event is deemed only to include events held for the purposes of any matter that falls into one of the reasonable excuses set out in Section 4 of the regulations. This means that you cannot organise or participate in any gathering that falls outside of one of the reasonable excuses for leaving your home discussed earlier. The wording of this section is not what I expected. I expected the language to be more specific as to the required closure of business. However, I do believe that Section 5 creates a legal impediment that would prevent businesses requiring their employees to attend the office or any other place which is not their place of residence between 8th and 12th April 2020, which date may be extended to the 5th of May or further, unless the service being provided by that employee is classified as an essential service. So, this Section 5 has the net effect of closing businesses that are either not deemed essential by the government or that cannot operate remotely due to the fact that their workers are legally prevented from leaving their homes to go to work. Now, I've heard a great deal from the government and the Gardaí about the high level of compliance being exercised by members of the public in relation to the request to work from home, only make necessary journeys and exercise social distancing. And for this reason, I was not sure if the government would actually sign the regulations into law. So when I heard very late on Tuesday night that they had signed these regulations into law, I'll be frank with you, I was very distressed. While a great number of people appeared to share this feeling, reports of support from the public and mainstream media for the actions taken by the government disturbed me more than the distress I felt. Here is what concerns me about these regulations. Number one, the possibility that they will create a precedent for similar laws which restrict the fundamental freedoms set out in the Irish Constitution. An example I gave previously was in respect of climate change. 2. The possibility that the public are and have been conditioned to accept draconian laws, thereby making it easier to implement similar laws into the future. 3. The fact the perceived moral weight behind the regulations is making it impossible for people to question either the proportionality or the content of the regulations without being viewed as wicked. 4. In my opinion, the initial operation period of 4 days was only to test the waters and gauge the public response. However, many people, in justifying the enactment of these regulations, responded to people questioning them with, "What are you worried about? It's only 4 days." 5. The willingness of the public not only to relinquish their and our human rights without question, but also to suggest the laws don't go far enough and should have been implemented sooner. 6. Gardaí abuse of powers, as has happened in other countries, with guards suggesting they have the legal authority to question whether the items bought which necessitated you leaving your home were essential. To be clear, Gardaí may ask you questions about where you intend to go. They may even ask to see inside your shopping bags. However, if upon inspection of your shopping bags, the Gardaí should only find an Easter egg and a bottle of wine, the law gives this Garda no legal authority to question whether these items are deemed essential. So if you wish to leave your home to buy nothing other than chocolate, you may legally do so. And 7. Whether the measures enacted are proportionate. In my view, it is difficult to justify putting the entire state of Ireland under what is effectively house arrest while at the same time leaving the ports and airports open. Remember that the Health Preservation Act gave the government the authority to place restrictions on travel to and from the state. So while you are legally compelled to stay within 2 kilometres from your residence for exercise, a person from any corner of the world can freely enter Ireland. Does this seem right to you? Now we'll take a brief look at a couple of the questions I've been asked most frequently over the past several days. Number 1, what is the legal status of the government in light of the general election result in February 2020? What we currently have in Ireland is called a caretaker government. Under Article 28.11.1 of the Irish Constitution, the incumbent Taoiseach and ministers remain in office as a caretaker government until a successor is appointed. Question 2. Does the current government have legal authority to pass laws? Yes, they do, as there is nothing in the Irish Constitution or Irish law which limits the power of a caretaker government. However, if legislation is enacted by a caretaker government, it must pass through the newly elected houses. Yes, they do, as there is nothing in the Irish Constitution or Irish law which limits the power of a caretaker government. However, if legislation is introduced by a caretaker government, it must pass through the newly elected houses. 3. We are not in a time of war, so how can the Irish government pass this emergency legislation? When people ask this question, they do so in the context of Article 28.33 of the Irish Constitution, which deals with the enactment of legislation during times of war or armed rebellion. The government have not passed the current legislation under this provision of the Constitution. Instead, they have relied on Article 15 of the Constitution, which grants the government ordinary law-making powers. The good thing about passing legislation this way is that it will not be immune from legal challenge on the grounds that it is unconstitutional. Question 4. Is the Health Preservation Act and the regulations constitutional? Human rights law still apply in times of emergency, and the Irish government continue to be bound by the Irish Constitution and the provisions of the European Convention on Human Rights during periods of emergencies. Therefore, any curtailment of rights must still meet the proportionality requirements of both the Irish Constitution and the European Convention on Human Rights. The Health Preservation Act provides that the state's authority to introduce such legislation derives from its constitutional duty to respect and vindicate the rights of citizens to life and to bodily integrity. However, the Irish courts have made clear on numerous occasions that the requirement to vindicate one right will not cancel out the others. So the government's duty to defend and vindicate the rights of citizens does not cancel out or curtail the fundamental rights of citizens to freedom of assembly and association. The key, therefore, is: are the restrictions proportionate and necessary in order to achieve the aim of protecting life and bodily integrity? It's difficult to say if a court would consider the current legislation constitutional. However, it should be noted that in previous cases, courts have given the Oireachtas a wider margin to strike the balance between the common good and individual rights in times of emergencies. To conclude, I know there is a lot of information to consider in this video, and the answers are not simple. Do we accept the current lockdown and possibly save lives, but in so doing create a legal and moral precedence that could unravel the very freedoms our country fought so long to secure? The answers to such questions are for you to decide. Thanks for watching.